You think you've seen heroes, but you haven't seen anything yet. The words echoed in the crowded parking lot, just as Jamal Carter, a man who had always lived in the background of his own life, found himself stepping forward into the unknown. It was a bright, sweltering afternoon when Jamal noticed a commotion near the side of the building. A black SUV was parked askew, a group of people shouting. Jamal had been on his break, his hands still sore from a long morning of labor, but something about the frantic scene caught his attention. He walked closer, squinting through the heat waves that rose from the pavement. A child, no more than 5, was trapped inside the car. The windows were rolled up, and the air inside was thick with the summer heat. It didn't take long for Jamal to realize that no one was moving quickly enough. Time was running out. The child's face was pressed against the glass, pale and frightened. Without a second thought, Jamal moved. He wasn't a firefighter. He wasn't a paramedic. But he had the strength, the quick thinking, and the sheer determination to act when others hesitated. He ran to the car, his boots thudding against the asphalt, and yanked at the door handle. It was locked. Panic began to bubble up inside him, but he suppressed it. The child's life was at stake. He looked around, saw a heavy rock on the ground, and grabbed it. With a few swift movements, he smashed the window, the glass shattering in a sparkling arc. The child gasped, taking in a sharp breath of fresh air. Jamal reached inside, pulling the little one out of the car, cradling the child in his arms. The crowd that had gathered around him slowly started to step back, some of them clapping, others pulling out their phones. Jamal didn't care about the applause. He wasn't doing this for the recognition. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. The child was safe. That's all that mattered. He looked down at the little face in his arms, relieved to see the child breathing normally again. But just as Jamal was about to pass the child to the worried mother, a voice rang out from the other side of the parking lot. "Hey, what are you doing?" Jamal turned, his heart sinking when he saw the figure approaching. Officer David Richards, the local law enforcement officer who never missed a chance to make his presence known. Richards strode toward him, his uniform sharp against the sunlight. He took in the scene, the broken window, the crowd, and Jamal holding the child. A moment of hesitation passed before he spoke. "You can't just go around breaking windows. You're under arrest." Jamal's heart stopped for a second. Arrest? For saving a child's life? His voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "What? You're arresting me for saving this kid?" Officer Richards didn't flinch. "You're interfering with an official rescue. I'll take it from here," he snapped, stepping closer to Jamal. Jamal stood there, speechless, as the officer's words sank in. The child was safe, but Jamal wasn't. The officer moved to handcuff him, and the crowd watched in stunned silence. Jamal could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had done the right thing, but now, it seemed, the consequences were beyond his control. As he was escorted to the squad car, the whispers among the crowd grew louder. Jamal kept his head high, his thoughts racing. Why was this happening? Why was he being treated like a criminal for saving a life? The answer was simple. It wasn't just about the child. It was about what Jamal represented. A man of color, someone society often overlooked, taking matters into his own hands and doing what no one else had the courage to do. He wasn't just saving a child. He was defying an entire system. And the system wasn't happy about it. As Jamal was pushed into the back of the squad car, a heavy silence settled over the crowd. His mind raced, heart pounding as the door slammed shut. The engine of the patrol car hummed to life, and as it pulled away, Jamal caught a glimpse of the worried faces of the people who had witnessed his act of heroism. Some of them raised their phones, no doubt capturing the moment for social media. But Jamal couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Was he really being arrested for saving a life? His thoughts spiraled. He had acted instinctively, without hesitation, to save that child. The air in the car felt stifling, oppressive, and Jamal shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Officer Richards sat in the front, silent except for the occasional glance in the rearview mirror. Jamal's mind flickered to the child's grateful mother, to the child he had saved, and to the strange, unexpected turn of events. He had never imagined that doing the right thing would lead to this. The patrol car soon pulled into the police station. Jamal was escorted inside, his hands cuffed, the cold metal biting into his wrists. The officers at the station didn't look at him with admiration or gratitude. No, they just stared at him. almost as if he were a criminal. He was taken to a small interrogation room, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing softly. Jamal sat alone for what felt like an eternity. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional murmur of voices in the hallway. It was as if the world had forgotten the man who had just saved a life. Jamal's thoughts were interrupted by the door opening. Officer Richard stepped in, followed by a man in a suit. The man looked important, with a calm, almost rehearsed demeanor. He sat across from Jamal, folding his hands neatly on the table. "You're a brave man, Jamal," the man said, his voice smooth. "But bravery doesn't always mean doing the right thing. We've got to follow protocol, you see." Jamal didn't respond. He wasn't interested in protocol. He had saved a life. But the man continued, his words like a dull thud against Jamal's chest. "You can't just break into a car like that. You've got to understand, Jamal, the law isn't something we bend. It's not something we twist for anyone, no matter the circumstances." The words felt like a slap in the face. Jamal's mind raced. He had saved a child. How could they not see that? He clenched his fists, his thoughts boiling over. The man in the suit leaned forward, his voice turning colder. "I'm not saying you didn't do something heroic, but now you're going to have to answer for it. You've put the department in a very difficult position." Jamal sat there, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, but he stayed quiet. What could he say? They didn't care about his good deed. They didn't care about the child. The man stood up, adjusting his suit. "You'll be hearing from us soon. For now, just sit tight. The investigation is ongoing." Jamal's stomach sank. Investigation? They were investigating him for saving a child's life? The absurdity of it hit him all at once. As the door clicked shut behind the man, Jamal sat in the sterile room, the cold air swirling around him. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. The system, the very system that was supposed to protect people, was broken. Jamal wasn't just a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world. A black man, doing the right thing, but punished for it. As the minutes dragged on, Jamal felt a sinking sensation in his chest. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everything he represented. Jamal had done the right thing, but now he was left to face the consequences of his actions. Consequences that had nothing to do with the child he had saved and everything to do with a world that wasn't ready to change. I was still sitting there, feeling the walls of the room close in, when the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Officer Richards who entered. A tall man in a dark suit walked in, his shoes clicking sharply on the hard tile floor. He didn't look at Jamal at first. Instead, he took a seat across from the table, setting down a briefcase. The man's cold, calculating eyes never left Jamal. He had the look of someone who had seen everything and knew how to handle the situations others couldn't. "Mr. Carter, I'm sure you're confused," the man began, his voice steady but sharp. Jamal didn't respond. He wasn't confused. He was angry. Angry at the situation. Angry at the system that had trapped him in this mess. "You saved a life," the man continued. "And now, because of that, you're in more trouble than you could have imagined." Jamal finally spoke, his voice low. "I don't understand. I saved a child's life. Why am I being treated like a criminal?" The man didn't seem to be bothered by the question. He just leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping the edge of the table. "It's not about saving the child," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "It's about the law. You broke into private property. You took matters into your own hands. You didn't follow protocol, and now the department is scrambling to fix this mess." Jamal felt his anger rise again, but he bit his tongue. He didn't want to give this man the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. "I did what any decent person would do," Jamal said, his voice steady now, but there was a fire behind it. "That child needed help, and I was there. I didn't hesitate. I saved her." The man just stared at him for a moment before responding. "You saved her, but you didn't do it in the way we approve of. There's a process, a way things are done, and you didn't follow it. That's why we're here." Jamal's mind raced. Process? Procedure? The words felt empty to him. "I didn't care about the process," he said. "I cared about saving that child. No one else was doing anything." The man let out a long, slow sigh, as if he were speaking to a child. "That's your problem, Mr. Carter. You think this is all about doing the right thing. But it's about power. It's about control. The system has rules, and you don't get to make your own. You think just because you did something good that you should be rewarded for it? That's not how this works. Jamal felt the weight of the words press down on him, but he refused to let them break him. He'd done the right thing, and he wasn't going to let anyone make him feel guilty for that. You want me to apologize for saving a life? Jamal's voice was sharp now. You want me to regret doing what was right? The man's eyes flickered with something. Maybe annoyance, maybe amusement, but he didn't back down. No, Mr. Carter, he said, standing up and grabbing his briefcase. What I want is for you to understand that you've put yourself in a situation you can't control, and that's going to cost you. The door closed behind him with a click, and Jamal was left alone again. He sat there, his hands still cuffed, the anger inside him bubbling up. But there was something else there too, a feeling he hadn't had before. A feeling that he was done letting people walk all over him. He had saved a life. He wasn't going to let them take that away from him. The door opened again, and Officer Richards stepped inside, his expression unreadable. Mr. Carter, he said, his voice curt. You're free to go? For now. Jamal stood up, his wrists aching from the cuffs, but he didn't care. He walked out of the interrogation room, his head held high. He wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. Jamal stepped out of the police station, the cool air of the evening washing over him, but it did little to soothe the storm brewing inside. He had been freed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The moment the officer had told him he was free to go, it felt like a hollow victory. It was as if he had done everything right, and yet, here he was, caught in the system, fighting a battle he never asked for. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart skipping a beat as he saw the screen, a message from the child's mother. Asterisk, thank you for saving her. You are my hero. Asterisk, his breath caught in his throat. Hero? It felt strange, like a label he didn't deserve, a title that was now tied to this mess. He wasn't thinking about being anyone's hero. He was just a man who saw a child in need and acted. But the message struck a chord with him. It was the first real validation he had received. The first acknowledgement that, in this broken world, someone saw him for who he was, not for the color of his skin or the mess he was now in. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and started walking. The streets seemed quieter than usual, but in his mind, the noise was deafening. The sirens in the distance, the murmurs of conversations behind closed doors, the pressure of people watching, judging, and waiting for him to break. It was all so much. His feet carried him toward the bus stop, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just the need to go somewhere, anywhere. He felt like he couldn't stay still. As he waited for the bus, Jamal's mind drifted back to the conversation at the police station. That man in the suit, his cold words, how he had dismissed Jamal's actions as if they were nothing more than a mistake. He had been forced to confront a hard truth. He didn't matter to them. He didn't matter to the system, to the people in power, to the ones who made the rules. He was just a tool to be used, a problem to be solved. And yet, he had done something no one else had the courage to do. He had saved a life. A small victory, yes, but a victory nonetheless. The bus pulled up, and Jamal stepped inside, the hum of the engine providing a brief respite from his thoughts. He found an empty seat near the back and sat down, leaning his head against the cool window. The city passed by in a blur, the streetlights flickering as he watched it all fade into the distance. There was no place for him to go, no safe haven. He wasn't sure if he was running away from the past or toward the future, but the weight on his chest grew heavier with every passing minute. The bus came to a stop, and Jamal looked out the window to see a familiar street. His heart sank. This was it. The place he had been avoiding. His neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was home. The same home that had always been there for him. The place that had shaped him into the man he was today. As the doors opened, he stepped off the bus and into the night. The streets felt colder now, and the lights seemed dimmer. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty street, his own presence too loud in the silence. He knew he had to face the consequences of his actions. They were coming, whether he was ready for them or not. The lawsuit, the investigation, the judgment, it was all just beginning. And yet, despite the fear that tightened his chest, Jamal knew he couldn't let it define him. He couldn't let the system break him. Not after everything he had already endured. He stood tall as he walked down the street, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but his resolve stronger than ever. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the table. I rolled over, squinting against the bright sunlight that spilled through the window. The world outside seemed as chaotic as it had the day before. The noise, the pressure, the endless cycle of people watching and waiting for me to fail. But today, something felt different. As I reached for my phone, my heart sank when I saw the name on the screen, Officer Richards. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation still heavy in my chest, before swiping the screen. Jamal, we need to talk. It's about the lawsuit. Call me back as soon as you get this. I set the phone down, my mind spinning. A lawsuit? I had expected the backlash, the media frenzy, but this was different. It wasn't just about the police department or the child anymore. This had become bigger, much bigger. I stood up, pacing around the small apartment. The walls, once familiar, now felt like they were closing in. I could hear the faint sound of traffic outside, the world moving on while I stood still, caught in a mess I didn't create, but somehow was now part of. I grabbed my jacket, the cool fabric a welcome distraction from the heat of my thoughts. The lawsuit could be the end of everything I had worked for. It could ruin my name, my reputation, and yet, it could also be the catalyst that forced change. But I wasn't sure I was ready for the consequences of either. I took a deep breath and made the call. Officer Richards picked up on the second ring. Jamal, I'm sorry to bring this to you, but things are escalating quickly. The department's under pressure. They're blaming you for causing a scene, for disrupting the process. They want you to settle, and settle fast. Settle? The word echoed in my mind. It felt like a trap, another attempt to silence me, to make me disappear back into the shadows where they thought I belonged. I'm not settling for anything, I said, my voice firm, even though I could feel the fear creeping in. I did what was right. I'm not going to back down just because they're uncomfortable with the truth. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Jamal, I know you're angry, and I understand why. But you have to think about the bigger picture here. The lawsuit, the media, the attention, it's all going to make things worse for you. Worse for me. Worse for me. I had been walking through life as a ghost, never daring to step out of line, never speaking up. And now, when I finally did something to make a difference, to stand up for what was right, I was being punished for it. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not now, not ever. I'm not backing down. I said again, my voice unwavering. Tell them to bring it. I'll fight this. All the way. I hung up the phone, the weight of my decision settling in. This was no longer about me. It was about the future, about proving that the truth couldn't be hidden just because it made someone uncomfortable. I had no idea how this would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being silent. The fight had only just begun. I stood in front of the courthouse, the weight of everything pressing down on my shoulders. The media was already here, cameras flashing as they caught every move I made. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I walked into this building, but it wasn't the overwhelming swarm of attention. They were all here to watch a man who had done nothing more than save a life. A man who was now at the center of a storm he couldn't control. My lawyer, a man named Richard Evans, was standing beside me, trying to steady my nerves. We've prepared for this, he said, his voice calm, but his eyes revealing the tension that I knew was also present in him. Just remember, they want you to break. Don't give them that. I nodded, but I didn't feel steady. The only thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything. The doors to the courthouse opened, and I was ushered inside. The halls felt cold, sterile, as if they had no room for people like me, people who didn't fit the image of who they thought should be allowed to speak up, to act. The case was about to begin, and I was about to face a battle I had never imagined. Sitting in the courtroom, the pressure seemed to build. The opposing side was relentless. The department had hired a powerful attorney, someone who knew how to twist the truth, to make it look like I had done something wrong. The charges they were throwing at me didn't make sense, but they didn't have to. All they needed was to make me seem like the bad guy. Mr. Carter, the attorney for the police department, began, his voice smooth and calculated. You claim to have saved a child, and yet, in doing so, you put yourself above the law. You broke into a private vehicle, causing damage, and you ignored the proper procedure. You put yourself and others in harm's way. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, but I refused to let them intimidate me. I did what needed to be done, I said, my voice steady, though my insides were churning. A child's life was at risk, and no one else was doing anything. I saved her. That's all that matters. The attorney sneered, as if my words meant nothing. You're not above the law, Mr. Carter. No one is. The law exists to protect people, not for individuals to take matters into their own hands. I could feel the frustration bubbling up inside of me, but I held my ground. I wasn't going to let them twist this. I wasn't going to let them take away the one thing I had done right. My lawyer, Richard, leaned in, whispering in my ear, "Don't let them get to you. We have the truth on our side." The truth. The word echoed in my mind. It was the one thing they couldn't take from me. No matter how much they tried to spin the situation, the truth would always be there. The next few hours were a blur of arguments, objections, and questions that seemed designed to make me second-guess myself. But I kept pushing forward, answering each question with the same conviction. I saved that child. That was all that mattered. By the time the judge called a recess, I felt drained. My body ached from the tension, but I couldn't afford to rest. Not now. The fight wasn't over. I stepped outside the courtroom for a moment to gather my thoughts, but the noise of the cameras and reporters outside was overwhelming. "Jamal, what's your response to the lawsuit?" one reporter shouted, shoving a microphone in my face. "Do you think you're above the law?" another reporter asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't going to let them dictate the narrative. I wasn't going to let them make me the villain in my own story. I turned to Richard, who was standing beside me, watching the chaos unfold. "They don't care about the truth," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "They just want me to break. To back down. But I'm not going to give them that." Richard nodded, his expression serious. "I know. And neither are we." I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew the road ahead was going to be long and filled with challenges. But for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't fighting just for me. I was fighting for everyone who had been ignored, pushed aside, and forgotten. This was about more than just a lawsuit. It was about justice. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against you. I stood at the front of the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest as the judge's gavel echoed through the silence. The room was tense, the air thick with anticipation. I could hear the whispers of the crowd, the reporters' cameras clicking in the background, but I didn't let it distract me. The weight of everything, of what was at stake, pressed heavily on my shoulders. I had come this far, but it felt like the hardest part was just beginning. The department had thrown everything they had at me. They had tried to break me down with their lawyers, with their lies, with their pressure to settle. But I hadn't backed down. Not once. I couldn't. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who had been overlooked, every voice that had been silenced, every life that had been devalued simply because of the color of their skin. The judge raised his hand, and the room fell quiet. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice steady. But there was something different in the way he looked at me. Something like understanding, or maybe even respect. "You've made it clear that you believe your actions were justified, and I can't say I disagree. You saved a life. There's no denying that." My lawyer, Richard, shot me a quick, encouraging look. It wasn't over yet, but hearing the judge speak like that felt like a small victory. It felt like someone in power, was finally listening. The prosecutor, a sharp-looking man in a dark suit, stood up, his expression tight. "Your Honor, while there's no question that Mr. Carter's actions were motivated by good intentions, the law is the law. It doesn't matter whether he was trying to help or not. He broke the rules. He damaged private property and put himself in a dangerous situation. He's guilty of breaking the law." His words hung in the air, and I could feel my chest tightening. He was right in a way. I had broken the law, but I didn't do it for personal gain. I did it to save a child's life. Wasn't that worth something? The judge looked at the prosecutor, then at me, his expression neutral. "I understand that, but the law must be applied fairly. We cannot simply disregard it because someone thinks they know better. Mr. Carter, your actions have consequences. And now, we must consider whether those actions were truly in the best interest of the child, or if they were a result of your own judgment, which may have been flawed." Flawed. My blood boiled at the word. But I kept my face calm, my posture steady. I wasn't going to let them turn this around on me. I wasn't going to let them make me the villain for doing the right thing. "Your Honor," Richard said, standing up to address the court. "Mr. Carter's actions were not a result of flawed judgment. They were a result of his humanity. He saw a child in need, and he acted. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't hesitate. He did what any decent person would do. And that's what we're asking the court to recognize. The value of doing the right thing, even when the system fails you." There was a moment of silence in the room. The prosecutor opened his mouth to argue, but the judge held up his hand. Enough, the judge said firmly. I've heard enough. I'll make my decision soon. For now, you're free to go, Mr. Carter. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. Free to go? It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. But the judge's words felt like a glimmer of hope. The fight wasn't over, but it wasn't lost either. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the hall. The reporters were waiting outside, and as soon as I stepped into the hallway, they rushed forward, cameras flashing. Jamal, do you think you'll win the lawsuit? One reporter shouted. What's next for you? Another asked. I stopped for a moment, facing them, my heart racing. The weight of their questions didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I believed. I'll keep fighting, I said, my voice steady and clear. Because the truth is on my side. And no matter what happens, I won't stop until it's heard. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I was holding my breath, as if the world was watching me, waiting for something, waiting for me to break, to lose my composure. But I wouldn't. Not now. The case had taken a turn that was unexpected, but I had learned that there was power in silence, in staying calm when everything around you is chaotic. I had done everything I could, and now all I could do was wait. The days that followed were filled with a strange kind of stillness. The media had moved on to the next story, the next controversy, but there was always the underlying tension. The weight of the lawsuit still hung over me. Every knock on my door, every phone call, every letter that came through the mail seemed like another potential battle I had to face. But in the midst of it all, there was something that kept me grounded, something I couldn't ignore. The truth. The truth was what had led me here, and it was the one thing I could hold on to. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't the villain. I had done what anyone should have done, what I hoped anyone would have done if they were in my shoes. I had saved a life. I had been there when no one else was. I had acted when every instinct in me told me that it was the right thing to do. And the truth of that was powerful. I knew that the fight wasn't over. The department's lawyers were still pushing hard, trying to paint me as reckless, as someone who didn't understand the consequences of their actions. But what they didn't understand was that I didn't need to understand the consequences. What mattered was the life I had saved, and nothing could take that away from me. It was on a quiet evening, 2 weeks after the hearing, that I received the call. Richard's voice came through the phone, calm but with an edge of excitement. Jamal, I have some good news. The judge is ruling in your favor. The lawsuit is being dismissed. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. It felt unreal, like something I had dreamed up in a moment of hope, a distant wish that could never be real. But it was real. The relief flooded through me, but there was also something else. The fear, the uncertainty, the constant feeling of being under a microscope, it all seemed to dissipate in that moment. The truth won, Richard said, his voice firm and reassuring. It was never about the law. It was about doing what was right. I can't believe it, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I've been so worried. I didn't know what would happen. You've got nothing to worry about now. You're free. The words sank in slowly. Free. It wasn't just the end of the lawsuit. It was the end of the fight I had been fighting for so long. A fight that had drained me, had changed me. But in the end, it had made me stronger. I had stood my ground, and I had won. I sat there, in the quiet of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, and let the reality settle in. The fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, they all faded into the background. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take away the truth. I wasn't going to let anyone silence me again. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I had done what was right, and that was something no one could take from me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It was over. The battle had been fought and won, and I had come out the other side not broken, but stronger than I had ever been before. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching as the sun set behind the city skyline. It was a quiet evening, the kind where everything seemed to slow down just for a moment. The weight of everything that had happened, all the tension, all the struggles, seemed to have lifted, even if just for a while. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. The past few weeks had felt like a blur. The courtroom, the media, the endless conversations with my lawyer, Richard, about strategy and next steps. It had been overwhelming. But now, Standing here, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The lawsuit had been dismissed, and the truth had won. But it was more than that. It was the realization that I had finally fought for myself, for what was right, and come out the other side. That was something no one could take away from me. I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Richard approaching, a slight smile on his face. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice calm. But I could tell there was a sense of pride behind it. "Better," I replied, returning his smile. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what all of this means. It's not just about me. It's about everyone who feels like they don't have a voice, everyone who's been silenced or ignored." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. What you did took courage. And it's going to inspire others to do the same, to stand up when they know something is wrong." We stood there for a moment, watching the city as it slowly transitioned into night. The sounds of the street, the hum of traffic, the distant chatter of people all around us, seemed to fade away for a moment. It was just the two of us, standing together in this quiet space. "What's next for you, Jamal?" Richard asked, breaking the silence. I looked at him, thinking for a moment. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I do know one thing. I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to be remembered as the guy who got caught up in a lawsuit. I'm going to be remembered as someone who did the right thing, someone who didn't back down." Richard smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of everything lift. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Jamal. Whatever comes next, you're ready." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I had the strength to face it. I had learned that fighting for what's right was never easy, but it was always worth it. The city felt different now, not as overwhelming as it once had. Maybe it was because I had finally found my place in it, or maybe it was because I had found my voice. The fight wasn't over, I knew that, but I was ready for whatever came next. As I walked away from the